So we're trying something here on the 5 Reasons podcast. This is an emergency podcast as the Dolphins have traded for a new quarterback, Josh Rosen, from the Arizona Cardinals in exchange for the 62nd pick in the draft, which they acquired earlier on, moving from 48 to 62, getting a second-round pick next year and some other later-round picks as well. They have traded the 62nd pick in this year's draft and a 5th-round pick in 2020 in exchange for Josh Rosen. And Ethan is busy. I am Chris Whittingham, and so he's working tonight. We're going to try and get this up as quickly as we can. So instead of me reacting by myself and meandering for 20 minutes and giving you the opinion that you might have already heard today, we're going to solicit the thoughts of the various personalities in the 5 Reasons Sports Network. So as they call in, you will hear them. It could perhaps be chaos. It's something I wanted to try, so let's see how it goes. 954, hello.
Hello.
Is this Dutch?
It is.
Dutch, you're the first person who's called. Your thoughts on the Josh Rosen trade?
I love it. I think it's great value, and there's no risk to it at all.
That's all you got?
No.
I'm struggling with best case scenario because for me, best case scenario is he's decent. I can't see the world in which he's great. I just can't.
But I think it's still the possibility is there. Like I put in the I talked about is would you take Josh Rosen in the second round of this year's draft? I think the answer is yes, because I think he would have gone like 4 in this. He would have gone 4th overall in this draft. So I mean, the best case scenario is he lives up to the value of the 10th pick of last year's draft, which is probably a franchise quarterback. Worst case scenario is he sucks like you did last year and you get the first pick next year. I don't see how there's any downside to this.
Now, the other thing that's cool about this, and we have another caller, 954, hello, who's on the line?
Oh, that would be Jeremy Taché. How's it going, Chris?
Jeremy Taché, your thoughts on the Josh Rosen trade?
Well, all I heard at the end from Dutch there, and that was Dutch, I believe, right?
It was indeed.
Dutch.
It was
We do a
indeed
podcast
Dutch.
Together sometimes. I totally agree that it comes down to the upside versus the downside, right? And that's the whole premise of this trade. To me, you're swapping second-round picks in a couple of years in all reality, right, at the end of all of those moves. You're trading away a 5th and a 4th for Josh Rosen and a 6th. This guy was taken 10th overall last year, and yeah, he had a really terrible year, surrounded by a bunch of really terrible skill players and a bunch of really terrible offensive linemen. And then he was basically just thrust out the door by an organization that brought in a new coach with a new type of system that didn't necessarily fit his skill set the same way. They went with their guy. And now you got an opportunity to take a guy that when he was a freshman in college, like I understand, there's development, there's different types of things that happen with quarterbacks as they go from being a freshman in college to now a second-year player in the NFL. But when he was a freshman in college, we were talking about him that he was going to be the number 1 overall pick. You don't think a fresh start could help the guy? And also, as I've noted a couple of times on Twitter, an atheist Jew as the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, where it's a bunch of Jewish fans that have lost their faith in God because of the way that the Dolphins have played over the last few years, just could not be more perfect. But I honestly love the upside of the guy. I think there's a chance he could be good. And if he's terrible, like most of our actual Dolphins analysts think on this network that he will be, then okay, he's terrible. And you have a chance to go get whatever guy you want next year. And I think some of the myth here is that it needs to be specifically tank for Tua. I think there's a bunch of good quarterbacks that are supposed to be in the draft next year and the year after that now with all the draft capital that you've picked up over the last month or two, you'll have your opportunity if you're even, the worst case scenario, which is he's Ryan Tannehill and you're 7-9, you'll have a chance to move up to probably the top 3 or 4 picks with some of the draft capital you have and go get one of those guys, whether it's Tua or Fromm or Herbert or whoever else.
All right, so we have a new caller on the line. That new caller on the line, 954, hello.
Hello, it is Josh from the best podcast on the network.
You're damn right it is. Mark your territory. But I'm glad you called in as
Josh
Jeremy
Appel
was delivering that rant about an atheist Jew in South Florida. Josh Appel, the percentage of excitement that has to do with Josh Rosen being Jewish for you, him being the Dolphins quarterback.
More than 100%.
All right, let's go. Your thoughts on Rosen. Go.
Fellow member of the tribe, couldn't be happier. It's such a low-risk, high-reward move. You get with the 62nd pick this year, the guy who went 10th overall last year, he would have been the first quarterback off the board this year. It's incredible value. You're only paying him $6 million over the next 3 years. There's no cap hit that's significant. Worst case scenario, he's a backup to somebody, although given what happened just now, I'm not sure how plausible that is. Regardless, it's such a low-risk move, I don't see a downside to it. So, in fact, I actually got on the call at the end of Jeremy's rant, and I happened to agree with him. And, it's funny, considering the other podcast that him and I do together.
Josh agrees with me on something?
I know.
It's incredible. It's incredible the communities we bring together here. USF and UCF coming together as one to unite behind Josh Rosen. I feel like I'm the only one that's negative, though, so far. So I'll continue to ask you, Josh Appel, what is the best-case scenario for Josh Rosen? Is he a franchise-changing quarterback? Could you even envision that happening?
Absolutely, 100% yes.
Okay. I can't.
How's that for conviction?
I can't, man. I can't bring myself to think that Josh Rosen, after what we saw in year one, has it in him to, in one season, and this is the point that CK was making very well in the chat, in one season to go from this guy that was truly dreadful in Arizona to a guy that you're convinced can be your franchise. I just don't think that's possible.
I'm not saying that the situation in Miami is necessarily that much better than it was in Arizona as far as what he has around him, because it's probably about even. The offensive line, when healthy, might be a bit better than it was there. But there were so many different circumstances there that went into why he struggled so much last year. And there's plenty of tape that's obviously not good. There's plenty of tape that you can see that's like, there's something there. Now, at the same time, that's what Ryan Tannehill has been for 8 years. It's, he can make that throw in San Diego or LA, wherever it was last year, where he's getting hit at midfield and throws a dime to the back middle of the end zone. And wow, that's an elite level throw. But then obviously we see, the downside of Tannehill. So again, it's a risk, but it's a low risk. He may turn into what they want him to be as a franchise guy. They may not. I don't see the downside to this. I really don't. It's such a low risk. I just don't get how any reaction to this could be negative. I don't get it. They're not going to be good this year, most likely, obviously. They're probably not going to be that good the following year, but they're set up with over $100 million in cap space and a ton of draft picks next year. I don't see how there's any downside to this. I just don't. And I get what CK's saying. That's fair. He has to improve a lot. There's no question about it. But it's worth the risk. What do the Dolphins have to lose here? They're going to be bad anyways. And if you find something in Rosen, great. If not, okay. You start over again. You're already in the same spot now. I just don't see a downside to it.
Good stuff, everyone. Swings and misses. Mark your territory. Well represented. Get out of here now. 954, hello.
Hello.
Ethan, what's up?
Leaving Dolphins facility here. So
you have the reaction from the scene. What did Chris Grier have to say about trading for Josh Rosen?
Well, Chris Grier was with us for about 5 questions. He had to get back upstairs because they had a 3rd-round pick to make. He ended up taking the guard from Wisconsin. But basically, he didn't gush over Josh Rosen. I'll just say that. I mean, he said he was one of the more cerebral guys, that they had communicated with at that position. That he had the arm strength and everything else that was required. He was asked about why it was that they were not that interested in him last year, Chris, because if you remember, the Dolphins at 11th and he went 10th, and they could have jumped up to try to grab him. Instead, Arizona jumped up to 5 spots from 15 to 10 to take him. So he was asked, what's changed? And saying that he said Adam Gase, because, it was pretty clear last year that the 2 quarterbacks that they liked were Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen, not Josh Rosen. And so, again, he's pretty clear about that. He says coaching staffs change and they have different priorities. But I did get a chance to talk to a couple of Dolphin officials. I did not flag down Steve Ross, although he walked ahead of me out of the facility. But the sense that I get is this: that they just don't see any risk in this. Okay, I mean, they're not paying him anything. They're paying him like $6 million, I think, over 2 years, right? So Arizona is picking up the rest of it. So if you look at what the Dolphins are spending at the quarterback position between Fitzpatrick and Rosen, it doesn't amount to anything. And so I think their attitude on it is like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And I know we've had this debate with CK and with others about whether or not, there is a risk and that you not fall in love with Josh Rosen, but you like him enough that you don't go do something else. And I understand after the Tannehill Chronicles why there would be a concern about that. But I don't think they're viewing it that way. I don't think they see Josh Rosen as their future. I think they see him as a potential asset, maybe. Okay, and if you look at, Green Bay and New England, and we've talked about this too, they have kept drafting quarterbacks, even when they've had elite quarterbacks. And whether it was Brady or whether it was Favre, you bring in a Rodgers, okay, you bring in a Garoppolo, you bring in a Brissett, you bring in a Mallet, and you kind of see what happens. And in Green Bay, it goes back even further. I mean, before Rodgers, it was Aaron Brooks, it was Mark Bogert. Like, they had a ton of quarterbacks go through there. Pittsburgh has done it a little bit. Okay, a lot of other teams have done it, and the Dolphins, as we've talked about, have drafted 3 quarterbacks in the first round in their entire history. And, 2 of them are Hall of Famers, and one of them was Ryan Tannehill. Okay, so I just think that they view it as they need to add, and Grier said this, they need to add competition at that position. And one of your frustrations was that Tannehill never had any competition at that position. He was the most coddled athlete, in my opinion, in South Florida sports history. And so now they're at least bringing in competition for both Fitzpatrick and for Rosen. And if Rosen's bad or Fitzpatrick's bad, they get up higher in the draft. And if they're slightly good, they feel like they now have enough draft assets because they've kept enough of the other picks that they can move up and still go get – man, and maybe nobody's going to give them Tua, okay? But maybe they could get up and get a Herbert, get a Fromm, get somebody else still in the top 10, top 5 of the draft, in the same way that Chicago may have overpaid to get Trubisky, but they got Trubisky. And I think that that's the way that they view it.
We have a new contributor to the 5 Reasons Reaction Pod, and you know what? It is our most optimistic viewer of this trade, who happens to be a Jets fan. Mr. Bill from Smarkier Territory. Why are you so excited about this?
First of all, thank you for letting me come on this when I'm just the wrestling guy and a Jets fan. You might get a bonus here in a second because the Jets are about to pick. So if they have a terrible pick, you'll get to watch me freak out in real time.
So why are you so excited about Rosen?
I loved Rosen last year when the Jets were clearly in the derby in the market for any of the quarterbacks. And obviously things happened and we ended up with Darnold, and I'm not complaining about that at all. But all season I was watching UCLA games because I wanted this Rosen kid. So now that the Dolphins find themselves in this position, I can't understand why a certain segment of the fan base is it's absolutely driving them insane. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? The Dolphins are terrible, and as I jumped on, I heard Ethan make all the points that I would have made. The worst case scenario is, from a team standpoint, is that he stinks, and that the team stinks, and you have to take another quarterback next year. You just keep taking quarterbacks until you find the right quarterback. Even the damn Patriots keep taking quarterbacks, and they've got Tom Brady. So I don't understand what the negative downside to this is. And I just happen to think Rosen is. I mean, he's got that quarterback arrogance that you want. Like, everyone who runs across him seems to be kind of either love him or rub the wrong way by his attitude. So maybe the Dolphins need a little bit of that when you've got all shucks Ryan Tannehill for the last God knows how many years. This could be a shot in the arm. Or worst case scenario, best case scenario, he turns out to be a good quarterback. What the hell is the problem? They stockpiled picks. They recouped the second round pick that they would have used or that they would have lost to take him. There's no downside. And Smoot and CK are just adamant that this is all downside. I don't see a downside here.
Right, especially when you consider the salary, which is that it's like $6 million for 3 years. It's crazy. Yeah, but to me, the downside is almost the exact opposite. The downside is not that he stinks. The downside is you're on this wheel where again and again you're wondering whether he's just good enough and what that dividing line is going to be this year. If they go 5-11, are you going into 2020 with him as your quarterback? If they go 7-9, are you going into 2020 with it? Like, what does it have to be in order for you to think that he could be your guy?
If he can take the roster as presently constructed to something nearing and everybody is in a playoff run in the NFL, I know, but if he's 7-9, 8-8, 9-7, you're in the hunt, quote unquote, until week 16 with this roster as presently constructed, not the roster that Ryan Tannehill was using the last 2 or 3 years. That probably should have been better. This roster as presently constructed, yeah, maybe you have something. And obviously we have stats to back that up. But I'm not ready to throw this baby out with the bathwater, considering that dumpster fire in Arizona that he was dealing with last year, and he's dealing with Larry Fitzgerald's corpse. And who? Did David Johnson play 16 games last year? This is my ignorance showing. But there was nothing out there for this kid. So I feel like he hasn't been given a shot. If he goes out there and he's terrible this year, and he's the 362nd ranked QBR since they've started keeping the stat, or whatever the hell the number is that keeps getting thrown into my face, then yeah, maybe you're done. But who cares? You're taking it. You love the quarterback class next year, or people who know more than me do. So you just keep grabbing quarterback. What is Ryan Fitzpatrick going to give you? I mean, he's going to be too good He'll lose 17 or 15 games, and he's going to be not good enough to win 7 or 8. So at least go with the unknown. The devil you don't know. The season is a wash anyway. Oh my God! I know living through a tank is a nightmare. I've been doing it for the past damn near decade with the Jets since those Rex teams. But 1 year is not going to hurt this franchise. The Dolphins have been middling. Just go for the tank. The season was a wash anyway. The worst thing that happens is you find out you have a quarterback I don't understand.
And as Bill is ranting, we have someone who is a regular feature on the Smart Your Territory podcast, but more for your mispronunciation of his name. Hoots Houts is on the line. Houts, your thoughts on Rosen?
Dude, I absolutely love it. I can't believe they made this happen. I mean, he traded down. They got a 2020 second-round pick. You know, people are pissed because they had to give up a fifth. But, I mean, it's a win-win situation. The guy's 22 years old. You know, he's making, $6 million over the next 3 years. The Miami Dolphins gave up a second-round pick for freaking A.J. Feely many years ago. You know, this team has been looking for a quarterback for many, many years. I'm happy to see the Dolphins going after Josh Rosen.
Ethan, what did you make of the way that Chris Grier handled it in terms of all day we're freaking out. If they're giving up 48, this is bad. The fact they moved down 14 spots, pick up another second, and realistically, you have replaced a second that you've just given up and only given up a fifth-round pick next year. That maneuvering was about as well as the Dolphins have done from a general managing point of view for a long time.
Yeah, well, I've talked a lot about Jimmy Johnson, right, in the pods leading up to this, and that was a very Jimmy-like move in terms of moving down and stockpiling the other picks, and he said that the two moves were not connected. I don't believe that. I don't think they were dealing. He said they were dealing with Arizona for 2 long, grueling days. So there's no way they make that first trade with the Saints unless they know what they have basically with Arizona and what Arizona will be willing to take. And so you're right, because the thing is, they pick up – the key to this whole thing is the 2020 second-round pick, like Josh said. That's the key to the whole thing. I mean, you've stockpiled there. You're giving yourself more ammunition now if you need to trade up for a quarterback next year. Again, let's say that the teams at the top of the draft next year – look, let's assume Tua is going first. Let's assume first he's coming out of school, right, which we don't even know that. But let's assume he's coming out of school, and let's say he's going first. So if that's the case, you're probably not going to be able to pry two away from whoever's first, because if you're not first, that team that is first is probably going to have a horrible quarterback, right? But there are a lot of teams that have young quarterbacks in the league now that they're going to stick with, okay, for at least another year. Buffalo's not going to give up on Josh Allen after 2 years. Bill's Jets are not going to give up on Darnold after 2 years, right? I mean, the Rosen thing was very unusual because the Cardinals had a change of coaches after one season, and they were the worst team in the league, and there was a quarterback that was going first that they really liked, who their new coach was familiar with. Okay, so there were a lot of variables that played in that. So look, I'm assuming that Tua goes first, but I don't know that the team picking second or picking third or picking fourth is going to need a quarterback. Okay, and they may hold you for a ransom there. And now the Dolphins have picked up an extra second-round pick to make a deal like that happen. If they want to get a Fromm, if they want to get a Herbert, or any of these other guys who may be positioned somewhere between 2 and 5 in the draft. So that's the key to the whole thing for me. If you're just – I don't care about the fifth-round pick. Okay, you can replace that. But, well, that was weird today because the Cardinals tweeted out initially that they were giving the fifth-round pick, and then the Dolphins came down and told us, no, we're giving the fifth. I mean, they were fighting to give away the pick. It was strange. but I mean, it reminded me of the whole Marshawn Brooks thing that happened this year with Memphis at the NBA. But look, the reality is that fifth-round pick ultimately doesn't matter that much. Okay, you get compensatory picks. They're going to be due a third-round pick for Wake. They're going to be due a pick for Juwan James. So they're going to get additional picks. They're stockpiling picks. So I don't have an issue with that. The issue – second-round picks matter. Second-round picks allow you to do things. And so they get that extra second-round pick now, and that gives them flexibility. And like Bill said, I know, and I don't want to call CK a snob about this because he knows more football than the four of us combined, okay? But I think what's happened here a little bit is that the evaluation of the player, he just doesn't like the player. He doesn't like the way that he played last season. Neither does Uptown. Alfredo from 3 yards per carry. Neither do the beat guys, okay? Omar hates him as a player, okay? I mean, I was in that press room tonight. Armando, hates him because he hates Trump. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But this was not a popular trade with the Miami Dolphins beat guys. But for 5 reasons, it's freaking fantastic because we have something to talk about now. Because even if it's a crappy quarterback controversy, it's still a quarterback controversy. That gives us a few months. Luke can print up some T-shirts. But also, I just think it makes sense. Like, you can't have David Fales as your number 2. You can't have Luke Falk as your number 2. You just can't. You can't go. This is the NFL. You need quarterbacks, and so I don't see any risk with it. They're not. Chris, this is another thing I think you're overestimating. You are so scarred by the Tannehill experience that you're just assuming that they're going to buy into this guy because he throws 12 touchdown passes. Look, Nick Saban, it didn't go right because they ended up with Culpepper instead of Breeze. But Gus Frerotte won his last 6 games in 2005. That team went 9-7, won their last 6 games, just missed the playoffs. They went into the offseason, that regime, looking to replace Gus Frerotte. I think this regime would do the same thing about Josh Rosen. I don't think in any way they're committed to Josh Rosen long term. I think it's 1 year, see what you got. Can you become an asset for us or a backup for us or maybe a bridge quarterback for us? I don't think they really view him as a long-term answer.
Ethan Skolnick, Mr. Bill from Smart Gear Territory, Josh Houts from Dolphin Maven and 5reasonsports.com and Smart Gear Territory, Fantasy on 5, and various other contributions to the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thank you for joining this Emergency Reaction podcast.